Okay, so welcome. In this part we're going to talk about some input, and yeah, let's get started. So basically we will have an actor that is going to be controlled by our player. An actor that is controlled by our player is called a pawn, and you can see if we go over here to the place actors window, we have a pawn, and it says a pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receive input from a controller. Okay, so what we want right now is to make our own kind of pawn. So we will do this with blueprints. Before we created our own type of actor with blueprints, now we create our own type of pawn with blueprints. Okay, so yeah, let's create it. Name it BP player, and let's open it. Okay, let's dock the window somewhere, and let's save. For now we won't have any visible thing for our player, such a cube or I don't know, a 3D model. Now we care about input. So we will go to the event graph. This is where, if you remember, we write our code. So let's remove all of this, delete, compile, save. And now we want to create our input. So let's go over here to our content browser, and let's press right click and find input. Okay, so first we will create some input action. You can think of input actions as the data that our button will represent. So let's say, for example, I press the button Q. While pressing the button Q, we will have a variable that is set to true when the Q button is pressed and false when it's not pressed or released. Okay, so let's name this EA for input action IA Q, because I want it for the Q button. You can name this whatever you want. I just name it Q for simplicity, and it's gonna be a bool, meaning that if it's true the button is pressed, and if it's false the button is not pressed. Okay, and in order to finish this, we need to add an input mapping context. The input mapping context is every player has one of them, and it is where we tell what button we want to press in order to have this data active or deactivated or represented. Okay, so we'll name this IMC for input mapping context, and name it player as well. And let's open it, and you can see we can add a new mapping, and here it accepts an input action, and we just add this input action. And here let's close this, we don't need this. You can see we can assign the key we want to press for this action to get triggered. Okay, so I want to press Q, and if you search Q, you can say keyboard Q. Okay, and now if I go to player, now I can have an event for this input action we created before. Okay, so basically the structure that we have is, here we have an input mapping context which has a single input action, which is just a bool, true or false, and here is the event of this input action, and this node will execute when the button is pressed, when the button is triggered, when the button has started, we started pressing it, when the button press is ongoing, when it's cancelled, and when the button press is complete. Okay, these are really weird names that Unreal has chosen to give them, but yeah, we will go with it. And you can see because over here the value type is bool, which is a true false value. We have action value here, a boolean, true or false. Okay, so but now our pawn, our player, doesn't know yet that we have this input mapping context, and when we press Q we want to have this input action. So we need to assign this input mapping context to our player, and we will do this at the start of the game. So begin play, and the player, each pawn has a player controller, and that player controller is responsible for the input and the input mapping context. So we need to get this pawn's player controller, get player controller. You can type get player controller, and then we need to get the input subsystem, and then just add mapping context and have this like that. And then all we need to do is go over here to the mapping context and assign the IMC player. Okay, let's compile, and now that the mapping context is assigned, we can now listen to this event over here, and we want, while the Q button is pressed, I want to output a message, and let's have triggered print string. Okay, we will print a string to the screen, and Q pressing, I guess. And you can tweak some settings. We can change the color. I will make it green. Okay, and now we have created this custom pawn, but it's not ready yet because right now Unreal doesn't know that this is the player that we want to have as our main player, as our main character, and if we press play, it will by default just spawn this spectator cube thing that collides. Okay, so we don't want that. We just want our player that will just sit still in the world, and in order to do that, we need to go here top left. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to create a new game mode. So what is a game mode? Every map in Unreal has a default game mode. Okay, so right now the game mode that this map has is a game mode that just spawns this player. It doesn't do anything else, and we want to make our own game mode that can spawn our own player. Okay, so we need to create a new blueprint class, and we need to create our own type of game mode, and let's name it BP main game mode. Okay, and here you can tweak many settings, but the thing that we are interested in is the default pawn class, meaning that it's the class, it's the pawn which our game mode will spawn at the start of the game, and we want to select BP player. Now we haven't yet told this map that we're currently in the tutorial map that we want this game mode to be our main one, so we need to go here top left and game mode overwritten, select game mode class and BP main game mode. So if I press play, you can see right now that we don't move, but if I press Q, you can see Q pressing. Okay, and this message will last a bit on the screen, but yeah. And another thing that we can do is when we release the button, this gets triggered while we are pressing the button. So Q pressing, we can have different events based on how we are pressing the button. We can have one when we start pressing the button. I will do this to green, blue, no, green. I want on the start to be green, and then I want it to be blue while we are pressing the button, and on the completion, after we have released our button, I want it to be red. Okay, and let's change the text, started pressing Q, released Q. And let's have the duration be somewhat shorter, 1 second after it disappears from the screen. And compile, save, let's go back and let's play. Okay, so right now if yeah, you can see started pressing Q and Q pressing and released Q. It goes from the down to top, bottom to top. Okay, so yeah, that was our first input. Hope you understood. In the next part we're going to talk a bit about cameras, and after that episode we're going to talk about some player movement, and we will have a basic cube that can move around using our input, and we have a third-person camera capturing that view. Okay, so yeah, see you. Leave any feedback in the comments or any questions, and yeah, see you.